Hey guys, my name is Moon and welcome back for more Witch on the Holy Night. So last episode we saw Sojiro and Aoko trying to escape Alice, and they were formulating some ways how to do it, and let's see if they can do it this episode, right? So let us continue and let's see what happens.
別行動あの二人が
She was filled with foreboding at the Robin's report. Apparently, they had gone in opposite directions. The park's residents had set off after the boy's witness, and it would take them mere minutes to capture him, as the bird said.
どういうこと？追いかけているのは本当に彼？青子が変装しているのではなく。
The robin flapped its wings, chirping away any doubt. It had seen them with its own two eyes. Aoko was heading for the plaza and the cocky brat was making a run for the roller coaster.
青子が彼を見捨てた？ですって？そんな簡単なことならいいけど。ダンプティは彼に張り付いているの？
The robin nodded enthusiastically. It didn't know about the other birds, but with its superior night vision, it had seen that sucker clearly because he had moved to a high point.
ダンプティはなんて？最後まで歌わせろ。こんな褒め殺したい間抜けはまたとない。ですって。
Scratch Dumpty was a ticking time bomb that would drop and detonate the moment its target averted its gaze. That is, as long as its target continued to observe him. In a way, he was a gentleman ploy kickshaw, though Alice wished he would forgo such niceties when in battle.
そうね。視線を切らないだけでは、ダンプティからは逃げられない。表面の詩が完成すれば扉が開く。彼がどこまで逃げようと、あと少しでダンプティがしまってくれるわ。
Until the park, or rather the SNARK, was destroyed, Sojiro would not be able to escape, which meant the larger concern was Aoko. Aoko had promised to protect the boy, which begged the question, where was she running to?
ここにいる限り、青子の動向はつかめない。
Alice looked out over the park, ignoring the robin's attempt to get her attention with its plumage. Flat SNARK had nearly reached its full size. It was a different breed of beast compared to the other cheap ploys. To her, it was one of her three most irreplaceable and precious familiars.
そうね。任せたわスナーク。青子が諦めない以上、あなたも手は抜かないで。
Alice remained where she was, with the same historical merit as the troll under the bridge and the poison-clawed reptile. Flat SNARK was one of Alice's ultimate ploys. She was placing her trust in its reputation and ability.
でも忘れないで。これはゲームよ。勝敗がついたのなら、私のところに帰ってきて。
The drifting fog ignored its master's words. It was the one thing that Alice had misread. Flat SNARK was a king, even among the other ploys of terrible, vulgar antics. Death to the defeated, gruesome tragedy to the vanquished. It found no pleasure unless it brought about a total ruination of life and wealth. The fog that billowed like willowed laughter. After all, only a king had the right to decide the fate of the vanquished, and the SNARK's greed could not be contained. Thus, it hadn't even the slightest intent to play fair, despite its master's orders. Okay, what's it gonna do? Over 100 feet high, One careful step at a time, the figure made its way gingerly up the track, stretching into the heart of the amusement park. So he made it up here. He stayed his beating chest and the pounding of his breath. Even tiny movements were an obstacle to his progress. Amazingly, the one making this pale face advance higher and higher was Sojiro Shizuki. Far below, he saw a horde of bread creatures had congregated by the roller coaster platform. As they bustled this way and that, their numbers continued to increase by the minute, seemingly cheering on Sojiro with raised arms as he made his ascent. Or jeered him, more like beckoning him to calm down.
助かった。あれ、高いところは苦手なんだ。
Okay, so they can climb? Of course, Sojiro neither did Sojiro, but his current state was the lesser of two evils. The only thing that followed him now was the floating egg. Okay, so it's still following him. After heaving a huge sigh, Sojiro bent forward a bit and climbed the track that reached to the heavens. 150 feet now. If this were a skyscraper, he would be on the 16th floor. A strong gust of wind whipped through his hair. Humans had an instinctual fear of heights. In particular, a place like this, which called forth visions of falling to one's death, would cause a person's knees to tremble against their will. It was an instinct that forewarned death, urging its master to return to the safety of the ground. I mean, look at this, man. You're going very high, and then the wind is so strong. That is so dangerous. It was a reasonable reaction. Climbing the roller coaster tracks went beyond funny stories and into the realm of fantasy. The strong winds and change in air pressure were a hindrance. His instincts screamed at him to stop, causing his limbs to go numb, his muscles to go limp, and his mind to race. Even if he had been tied to a lifeline, a mere 15 feet of climbing would still have caused his thoughts to freeze out of sheer terror. And it would only get worse from here, exponentially so. Every foot forward increased the load on both his mind and his body by another degree.
よし、頂上まであと少し。
The burden on his mind notwithstanding, he carefully measured the toll on his body with every step. His legs, which had carried him running this far, threatened to buckle the moment he let down his guard. This fatigue was likely why Aoko had stressed that Sojiro's role was more dangerous than hers.
待てよ。逆を言うと、疲れてなければなんとかなると思ってたんだよな、青崎は。
Sojiro laughed as he stared at the floating egg. He reflected on the course of events that had led to this absurd situation. Not even 10 minutes ago, they had been engaged in conversation.
じゃあ次ね。正体が分かった以上、あとはどう壊すかを話し合いましょう。
Sojiro felt a shudder travel down his spine at Aoko's smug grin. In hindsight, Aoko had been more than happy at this point to make him do something absurd.
どう壊すかって、それなら。
Sojiro had spoken up, figuring what he was about to say was silly, especially considering Aoko had the magecraft to tear clean through the fence. Furthermore, up until now, he had not once offered his insight as to the form of Flat Snark, only due to his belief that there was nothing they could have done about it, even if they were the wiser. But yeah, what is the actual true form though? Maybe it's like super small, right? But that had changed. For Aoko, the impossible is quite literally within her grasp.
そうでもないわ。私の目算だと、あと50メートル分ギリギリで届かない。
Despair filled Sojiro's eyes. Aoko lifted a hand to her long hair with the magical energy in her fingertips, cut a clean tuft from her head.
足りない分は努力と根性ってね。あなたはできるだけ高いところまで逃げて。頃合いを見て合図を出すから。そうしたらこれを空に放ってくれる？しずきくんの役目はそれだけでいいから。
But based on where Aoko pointed her gaze, she did not really mean to leave it up to Sojiro, so he picked the highest place he could find. Aoko was staring conspicuously at one of the amusement park's two main attractions, the roller coaster.
つまり、青崎とは別行動をとって、あの怪物たちに追われながら、高いところに逃げ込めと。
そういうこと。ほら、あのうねうね動き出してるコースターのレールとかよくない？
Look at Aoko's face. She's like, yeah, you better go up there. That is perfect. There were two demons in this park. Her smile made even Sojiro want to respond that it was far from perfect.
疑いたくはないんだが、本当はあの子とグルで俺を遠回しに殺そうとしてるんじゃないか。
あら、私に殺されるのならいいんでしょ？
人の出現を悪用するのは良くないと思う。
Sojiro hung his head. This was not sane. If he did as she said, he would have died from exhaustion before Kitsy even had a chance to eat him.
私だって鬼じゃないわ。ほら、こっち向いて。おまじないかけてあげる。
It was the lightest of touches, close enough for their breath and skin to come in contact.
Oh.
He finished with a hushed voice. For one of them, this was a rather mundane magecraft. For the other, it was a head-spinning sneak attack of intimacy.
軽く、弱く、うまく、早く。チクタク、チクタク。急げや急げ。
Words that could not be produced by a normal larynx, carrying a peculiar weight to them, reverberated against his eardrums. If words were given colors, this would have been the color of her name, blue. I mean, ow, like AO, ow. Isn't it blue, right? Ow? Sojiro's exhausted body and burning blood gently cooled.
飛ぶ、泳ぐ、駆け抜ける。チクタクチクタク、汽笛を鳴らせ。星はいつでも北の空。どこまでも、いつまでも。
In reality, it took but a few seconds. But the sudden contact had felt a little longer until it ended.
よし、暗示成功！成功したはず！ここまで手応えがあったの初めてだし。アリスの小言もたまには役に立つじゃない。
A very merry Aoko stood aside a very confused Sojiro. After he asked what the heck had occurred, she responded.
簡単な暗示よ。一時的に恐怖心を消しておいたから、高いところに登っても平気なはず。あの手の作業で一番足を引っ張るのは同様でしょ？恐怖も何も感じなければ、地上何メートルだろうと平均台とそう変わらないってわけ。
Okay. He seemed to get it. It actually all sounded like Greek to Sojiro, but he'd accepted it as an explanation of her strange actions. He'd arrive at the summit of the track. At a height of nearly 200 feet, Sojiro had a bird's eye view of the entire amusement park. He was able to spot Aoko's figure right away. In the plaza not so far from here, she seemed to be occupied with something conspicuous. Her surroundings lay still. The red men were still busy trying to figure out how to reach Sojiro by trial and error from the roller coaster's entrance. Can we actually see her though? I don't think so. They had over 300 feet of distance to cover.
汗をかくはずだ。こんなに移動したのか。
The strong winter gales quickly dried the sweat on his brow, but he was drenched underneath his shirt. This much sweat was worth at least a half a mile run, and not to mention all the scares he had experienced throughout the night. I mean, of course he's gonna be sweaty. He went up a roller coaster. It's not like he rode it, right? Or rode it. He climbed up.
でもよかった。あとは合図を待つだけだ。
He felt a wave of relief. But not at the thought of Aoko destroying the SNARK in this nightmarish park. He was simply happy that he could repay a bit of his debt from the House of Mirrors. A blue bullet rose from the plaza where Aoko was located.
合図だ。
Sojiro stood up atop the tracks, pulled out the pouch he had stowed in his pocket and tossed it forward. Without any regard for his questionable footing, he gave it a mighty overarm pitch. The small pouch drew a parabolic curve in Aoko's direction, quickly becoming inside in midair. Inside the bag was a lock of her hair and a small stone weight.
高いところから風に乗せてくれれば、あとは何とかするから。
Aoko had said, but it was Sojiro's effort that had set the plan in motion. The tuft of hair remained airborne, drifting as if watching over its owner. Sojiro's job was done. He remained concerned about the egg hovering over him, but there was nothing he could do about it. Sojiro breathed a sigh of relief and leaned forward to watch the rest of the plan unfold, but then...
Mumu?
In a corner of his eye, he thought he spotted something familiar approaching Aoko.
Route set. Direct 1層2層予備に3層魔力提供体現に固定循環よし射角よし術式安定大まかよし
A pattern began to carve itself into the brick street. The casting of an unprecedented incantation with unprecedented range. Keeping the rising tension contained within her chest, the fledgling mage snapped her fingers.
決めたツアープランスターマイン
She kneeled at the center of the formula, raised her head to the night sky. Not even a glimpse of the transmogrified fantasy land around her entered her vision now. Only one thing, one untouchable thing was reflected in her blue eyes.
実はずっと気になっていたことが。
This is how their conversation started a few minutes prior. Sojiro began with simple statement of fact. In truth, it really was a simplest of discrepancies between the reality of an hour ago and the illusion of the present. A difference both infinitesimal and infinite at the same time.
雲があったから勘違いしたんだろうけど、
It was something hiding in plain sight. Something both seemingly impossible in reality and unusual, given its location. In this amusement park where every paradigm had shifted, something was brazenly flaunting its normalcy.
今夜は新月なんだ、青崎。
思えば初めっからその形だったものね、あんたは。
The distance from the Earth to the Moon was 238,900 miles. If it truly was identical to the actual Moon, then this monster indeed lived up to its eerie reputation. Was she gonna shoot it down? A distance that far would have meant that it had no need to hide its form. It could flaunt its true form in front of all. But due to the very fact that it was hiding its true form, it meant it must have been within reach. Then monster's camouflage implied that it sat within the reach of human hands.
こっちの最大射程はよくて600ってところだけど。
At this point, it was time to give it all she had. Drawing on the energy surging throughout the park, she extended her firing arm. A blue firework launched into the air. Looking up at her hair dancing in the wind above, Aoko reached out her right hand as if to catch the night sky. A mage's own body made for the perfect catalyst. And for a female mage, the hair she had grown out over many years made for a particularly valuable and powerful source of fuel. To use it, all she had to do was apply her will. She locked the fingers in both her hands together and shouted,
三層展開全術式連結起動
She hurled forth a clear challenge to bind the moon to herself. The mist began to whirl about in a vortex. Jesus. The monster high above bore its fangs at the sight of the blue spell that appeared in midair.
見抜かれたですって。
By the time Alice had noticed the change, the hostility between Aoko and the SNARK was palpable.
そう。なら青子の勝ちよ。すぐに戻りなさい。確かに雨雲を消したのはヒントの上げすぎだけど、それぐらいは多めに見て。スナーク。
The fog continued to thicken with no sign of abating. The moon that floated in the night sky could not pardon such an insolent mage. As if the Lord of the Night would have bowed down to such impudence, there was no staying its wrath at a challenge so flagrant.
スナーク。
The robin swooped in to give its report, but Alice waved it away. Her gaze was fixed on the transforming golden moon. Her calls of restraint did not reach it. The fairy tale monster was beholden to nobody, and it would have no qualms unleashing its vast might upon its puny prey. The core of her magic bullet howled. The magic circuits within her body spun. Aoko fed the magical energy, scorching her nerves with imaginary flame. She was linked to the formula inscribed on the ground. The spell was read and executed the same as it always was, but its output was beyond reckoning. With as much firepower, even this mundane process would invite injury upon its caster. It was enough to burn up the nerves that were acting as the barrel.
でもいける
The imaginary heat had reached a terrifying temperature. Aoko trembled at this endless feeling, but would have to grin and bear it. lest their efforts come to naught. Aoko could no longer move. When she had learned the SNARK's true form from Sojiro, she gave up on any superiority a movable turret offered, instead opting to become a stationary cannon. That was the only way she could reach it. It was impossible to hunt the SNARK unless she anchored her crest at this location and angle. At the same time, this action revealed that she was out of options. Once a fuse was lit, she would have no choice but to fight the bitter end. Aoko took a deep breath. This was the way she wanted it. Her preparations were complete. She would be able to deliver this maelstrom of magical energy directly to the moon like a rocket payload. The third layer floating in mid-air served as a cannon's muzzle and sight. It would fire magical energy once it reached criticality? Okay. And it allowed Aoko to adjust the angle of fire. The moon became warped within her scope. As Aoko charged her magical energy, the ploy displayed its golden form as if to mock her. Come worship the heavens, a powerless scion of an innocent bloodline. For there, it was a point among the otherworldly sky, called the greatest treasure known to the world of magecraft. A rarity more valuable than an entire kingdom. Crown Phantasm, that's the name? Gee, look at that. Yeah, it's like a skull, you see that? Set apart from the very beginning, the world's greatest fabrication. Her instinct screamed at her to delay no further. This fairy tale monster was the greatest of its kind, and its true form was about to be exposed. Its open hostility indicated that it was making preparations for a counterattack. She had to shoot it down first. Magical energy was at 80%. The formula was operating normally. All that was left was to pull the trigger, but the calm voice inside her head asked if that was really okay. She had one shot at this, and there was no going back. It was a battle of precision with no room for miscalculations. Even a tenth of a second of hesitation would tip the scales. Was she ready for the pain? Was she ready to deal with the fallout if she missed? Could she really even take down the moon with such a tiny bullet in the first place? I mean, maybe it's just a little bit closer, right? Than expected. Like, it's an illusion, I mean, that it looks like it's very far, but it's not that far. Her eyes fixed upon the moon were filled with determination. And an awareness that the moment she fired, the intense recoil would overwhelm her entire body. She shouted. With every ounce of spirit she possessed, she fired her ultra long range projectile into the sky. The third layer embraced the magic bullet, fired from the surface of the earth. The crest, an extension of Aoko's self, unleashed light to pierce the moon. However, An enormous blue canopy pulverized the beam. It returned the ether, the 3,000-degree flame, to nothing as it came in contact with the bullet. The recoil of the Grand Magecraft literally boiled her blood. Her body couldn't handle it. Her heart stopped. Her brain went numb from the pain of the impact. Her nerves putrefied from end to end. But her magic crest revived them all by force. Even though her vision had gone white, she could still see it. Swallowing the blood in her mouth, Aoko looked up with a scowl. There it was. An enormous shield of ice and a sneering deformed skull. Wait, she's attacking with that? I thought it was a small bullet. Oh, the ice was the shield. Okay, I guess I got confused, sorry. There was no time to think or hesitate. The magical energy throughout the park began to gather. Aoko knelt across from the tyrannical face of the moon. Aoko intuited that the ice had yet to fully form. Flat Snark still hadn't reached its full strength, which was exactly why by accelerating the spell, Aoko had damaged her own body. Aoko sat up and braced herself for the pain caused by the load placed on the formula after linking with the Snark. All she could do was endure it. All because Aoko had gotten a read on their relative strengths. Even if its volume of magical energy was identical, Snark's form, its mystic, was in a different league. Even if Aoko charged her energy to her absolute limit, she would barely make a dent in the ice wall. Meaning, if the Snark gathered as much energy as it could, there was nothing she could do to prevent her annihilation. She loaded her next shot. She issued orders to the floating third layer. Ignoring the toll on her body, she began to accelerate the first layer of formula. The roll on her right hand, single layer, was absorbed and stored surrounding magical energy. The thick fog that drifted through the park was an ancient ether spewed out by the Splat Snark's own body, but Aoko could pour it into her formula. Aoko's body, which had integrated with the formula, took an amount of magical energy that far surpassed its maximum capacity. It seethed in agony. Or rather, it trembled in delight. For a mage, magical energy was a propellant to reach the realm of mystics. The expansions of internal time, the liquefaction of the self, the release from the physical, what one might call a near-death experience. Aoko stood face to face with the reality on the boundary between it and such concepts. It's so epic, man. And that reality was here to break her will. To any bystander, the gap between them would be plain to see. But I look at that, it's so massive, man. How could you even shoot through that? The gun barrel named Aoko Aozaki. She had not a chance to chip away at that lump of ice. She accelerated the spoil further. The skull grinned. That ice was no shield. It was something to be used to crush mages who did not know their place. The moon laughed as it prepared to crush not just Aoko but the boy atop the roller coaster, as well as the park in its entirety. Her circuits were on the verge of going critical. Her body had been charged with a scorching power supply from her fingertips to her eyeballs. She would see to it that the bullet fired, that the Magecraft formula would be strengthened as quickly as her nerves' transmission speed would allow. A single attack was not enough. There was no way to shoot it from its flank, which meant there was only one solution. The third layer began to transform. It switched from a direct to alternating current. The spell's supposed strong point was its ability to adjust its trajectory mid-flight, but right now, all she wanted was numbers. Oh, is it gonna break? A blue sun shined down upon the amusement park. Beams of light at maximum output streaked forth to pierce the golden moon. Holding down the trigger, she continued to fire, taking in energy and infinitum. Blue flames shot forth at a critical level, but the ice would neither melt nor mar. No amount of sheer heat could make a dent in something formed from such a colossal amount of magical energy. The toll in her circuit sent them berserk and blood began to run free. The battle had become a tussle over the magical energy that filled the park. From the very beginning, this had been the SNARK's home turf. The SNARK had control over at least 80% of the space, while Aoko had 20 at best. The castle of ice descended as if to call the match. All she could do was delay the inevitable. But the thing is so huge though, okay? Like, I don't know. She knew that she had been backed into the wall, and right now the only thing she could do was to keep firing. Then again, perhaps not. There was another option. If she converted all of her magical energy into defense, there was a tiny chance, not a tiny, a great possibility in fact, that she could save just her. Clinging to the broken hope, Aoko continued to rotate her circuits. Time seemed to stop at the magical energy overdose. A second of intense pain lasted an eternity. Then amidst everything... Okay, what's happening now? Oh, what was that? Something approached one step at a time. Something from among the park's shadows. Something. She felt goosebumps from head to toe. Oh, is it Red Riding Hood? The issue was no longer the ice overhead. In the midst of the stillness, the Red Death drew closer step by step. So yeah, I guess she can get killed like this. Her circuits in her mind began to rupture out of terror. The composition of her formula and soul began to rip apart. There it was, just behind her. The footsteps, or its footsteps, came to a halt. It reached around and cupped her face in its blood-stained hands. What is that? I mean, it's a person. Was it Konnichiwa? She wanted to scream out with all her might. This is it. Nothing matters. I couldn't care less. Run or don't run. It doesn't matter. Quit hiding and reveal yourself. Use whatever you can and show no mercy. That was it. She had one final card to play. A miracle that would treat that ice like nothing more than a toy gifted to her as mere amusement. That was what the Red Death had come to kill. Using it would spell ruin, and not using it would mean death by ice. But why would Aoko hesitate? There was no conditions limiting her. There would be no price to pay by employing it here. She simply would cease to be herself. That was all. Humans love to exist in areas of gray. Dozens of electrical impulses disconnected in the brain every minute. Nothing lasts forever, not even oneself. It was not anything particularly worthy of disdain. It was not even anything remarkably worthy of being called taboo. What escaped her lips now was rage. Bewilderment from the red silhouette. The girl let out an inaudible scream. Could true magic truly be her savior? What an opportunistic load of bull. After all, to begin with. Indeed, Aoko was still dark when it came to the magic, whatever it was. Oh, it stopped. The soldier is just like, what can I do? She woke from her momentary hallucination, the very illusion her breaking soul had shown her. Whining had the opposite effect on her. Her pride was now ablaze. Soldier was right. Her opponent had to put her in check, but she had done the same to it. It was clear why she was losing. So now all she needed was a counterplan well within her abilities. No matter the odds, she was not one to give up without giving it one last shot. Her numbed fingers clenched into a tight fist. She was betting against the house, an unreasonable gamble that she had made her question her sanity. If her first step was off by an inch, her body would be instantly vaporized. But she knew a boy who never fled. I mean, yeah, soldier would run through or run to something even though he doesn't know what it is. She knew of a steadfast courage that could shine its light, no matter how small, through any desperate situation. Yes, there was more than just herself to be concerned about. If that ice fell, it would mean the destruction of the park in its entirety. Everything he had achieved, everything he had risked and dared and happily put his life on the line for, would all be for naught.
本当。それじゃあ何のために意地を張ったかわからない。
Determination and confidence surged through her like electricity. She was in no mood to be crushed by a giant sheet of ice. If she knew she was going to lose, she'd rather do so as the grandest firework possible. Aoko was a sore loser at this point. She would rather burn herself to cinders than let it decide her end.
Change! Change! Change!
She grunted in pain. Energy raged through her body. Her circuits were on the verge of disintegration. Inscribed upon her body, her magic crest was magecraft given physical form. It did not, however, stop with simply skin and flesh. It burrowed to the very marrow of her bones. Like, she's doing all of this. Does this have any lasting effects? I mean, she's pushing herself to the limits here, right? A playful smile graced her lips. Her sense of reason had been turned upside down by the pain. That was only natural. She had to praise her own body for holding out so long while pushed beyond its limits. The skull face noticed the abnormality. It finally recognized the challenge for dominance over this space. It laughed at the conceit it faced. Never did it expect a magician to challenge a great flat snark, lord of vessels over a millennium, and in such an age of decline, the great flat snark. She tried to catch her breath. She braced herself for the coming pain. She was going to smash that ice to pieces. Both had access to the same amount of magical energy. One of them was greatly outmatched, but
出力装置に差があった。魔力の吸引、方針の規模で負けているのなら、単純な話、私をでかくするだけでいい。チェンジ、ツアープラン。
Quite simply, her decision went beyond recklessness. She expanded both formulae to maximum size. The first layer would transform into a giant vortex, swallowing up the mist. The second layer would process it from one end and pump it into the barrel.
私の想定が甘かった。撃ち落とすなんて半端もいいとこ。この場合、跡形もなく打ち砕くった。
The primeval magical energy responded in concert with her conviction. It formed the pattern of a writhing serpent. Voiceless magical power flying the banner of revolution. Look at that. She beckoned the great power of old to feast its eyes upon the land, for it was the first of the trailblazers. the representative of mankind that knew no fear and would rend all manner of mythic and mystic to naught.
貸し借りはここまでよ、嘘つきブーチャム。お望み通り、のしをつけて返してあげる。
For the newest magician commanded the principles of consumption and extinction. An aberrant bullet of light melted through the castle of ice. Her barrel was tempered. Her control of magic energy was divine. Jesus. Her veins, totaling 62,000 miles in length, or 2.5 times the circumference of the equator, accepted the flow of magical energy with avarice. The subsequent magic bullet swiftly flew straight into the moon. That rose to the surface of the moon, a cry of terror, of indignation that echoed through the abandoned park. Reality was burned into the eyes of this creature of fantasy. As Aoko looked upon its vain attempt to struggle, she knew she had tasted victory. Victory despite her absolute reckless use of magical energy. Kinda true though. Very reckless using it like this. What's gonna happen to her after this, right? The energy scales had been tipped to the breaking point, but nevertheless in her favor. Shatter, shatter, shatter. The skyscraper shattered into atomized dust. The island, its unattainability extolled, had swallowed the whole despair of its many challengers. And that which remained of this once proud thing that boasted of its untouched knowledge? Dude, it shattered. Goodbye, Flat Snark. Azure mist bemoaned its demise. The ice canopy in the sky crumbled. The Snark hunting bullet jumped over the moon. Its throes of death sounded like the roaring sea, reverberating across this fairy tale land. The battle was over. The thick fog had dissipated and shattered ice melted away before it hit the ground. A lethal bullet had topped the Night King, along with his throne, affording him no time to grieve his loss. If the Night King was like this in Game of Thrones, it would have been better, right? The oil of the moon, the untouched Flat Snark. The dreamscape that had begun with its resurrection ended with its demise, drawing a close to this nightmare. But yeah, Aoko's gonna feel it though, for sure. Like the amount of magic she used there. She was already struggling while charging it, right? What happens now?
さすがに無茶だわ。
Flat on her back, Aoko looked up at the night sky. She lay there perfectly still, not able to move a single finger. I wonder what Alice will say though. Like, oh, look. When she tried, her whole body screamed out in agony. She was completely empty of magical energy and her magic crest had come to a halt. She estimated that it would likely require a whole day to recover all of her bodily functions. Sadly, all she could really do in that moment was take a breath. At least her chest was swelling with pride. She had gone toe-to-toe with a fairy tale monster and had emerged victorious. The battlefield conditions had favored her. It was true, but there was no denying that Aoko had come a long way in the last 6 months.
それはそれとして、アリスには謝っとかないと。
Okay. So let us take a break here. That was an epic battle, honestly. But yeah, I thought Aoko would lose there, honestly. That was way too big, right, of an iceberg. But she got through it though, the second try. And she defeated the great flat snark. So let's see what Alice says next episode. Even Sojiro, right? Like it was fully Aoko versus the flat snark this time. We got some Sojiro earlier in the episode, but after that it was just Aoko, right? We got Alice and Sojiro in the beginning, and then Aoko and her being a badass, destroying that thing. Will it have any consequences? We'll see, right? The amount of magical energy she dispersed there. It was literally breaking her though, right? Well, we'll find out. So anyways, we are going to continue this and do more of Witch and the Holy Knight in the next one. So I'll just see you then, guys. Bye-bye.